Many times people try to be diplomatic or maybe hide the true feeling or abstract out or whatever. But I'm not like that. I don't sugarcoat things. I just say things how I feel those things. And I've been thinking about why I do that. And there is some research around it. The first generation women who rebel, they learn early on that that is the only way they're going to survive. And because they rebelled at the time where nobody else did, they know or they have that blueprint or they have that path, and they're not afraid. When I go deep into my raw emotions, that is when I find somebody else connecting with me. I felt that too. I'm thankful that you said that. I'm thankful that you painted that. And that puts me going.
Welcome back, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of She Lights the Way, where every week we dive into the inspiring journeys of unsung women who are doing really remarkable things and lighting the way for all of us. I'm your host, Nicole Huseman. Today's guest is someone whose story is truly uplifting. Sujata Tibrewala defied societal expectations from a young age, rebelling against the traditional path laid out for her as a woman in India. From finding her own quiet corner to study as a girl, to overcoming domestic challenges, to discovering her own voice through art, and ultimately building a career in the open source software community, Sajata's journey is one of resilience, self discovery, and the courage to forge her own path. In this incredibly honest and moving conversation, she opens up about the battles she's faced, the moments that have shaped her, and how she found purpose and connection through expressing her raw emotions. Her transparency and wisdom are refreshing. So let's get started. Sajata, I am so excited to have you here with us today. I know we have known each other and worked together in the open source community for literally for years. And it is truly just an honor to have you here with us today. And what struck me when we talked earlier was how much I didn't know about your story. And I really think that there are so many others who could benefit from hearing what your path was into community. And so, with that, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Yeah, definitely. So I am an engineer. I've done bachelor's in mathematics, master's in engineering, and I worked in networking software for a while. But in 2016, I was looking for a role which was different than what I was already doing, and looking for a role which was more of an interaction with people. And that's when I found this community role, which was a perfect marriage between technical and people aspect of it. And at the time, I was really concerned on how I would be, because it was a totally uncharted territory, a non standard career path. But I realized that I just took to it. I was natural at it and I love it. And I'm at ByteDance right now. I'm in the open source program office at ByteDance. For those who don't know, we have 50 plus open source projects, and it is my job to grow the community around them.
Excellent. So, your story begins in India, right?
Yeah, so I come from a traditional Rajasthani family, like what is called Marwadi community. And at that time, it was decided at birth that I would be a mother and a wife and nothing else. But I'd seen my mother, my elder sisters, sister in laws suffer through that life, endless chores, taking care of kids, taking care of family, and still at the receiving end of everything. They were basically doing a thankless job with no appreciation. And this is not what I wanted for myself. And luckily, I was good at studies. So my teachers believed in me and they said I should either be an engineer or a doctor. I didn't like dissection. I didn't want to cut frogs or humans. And I loved math. So engineering was the obvious choice for me. So I was literally a rebel at the time. And somehow I was able to pave my path being the first generation engineer in the family.
That's exciting. I remember you talking about when you were growing up that you needed to find your own corner. Can you
And
talk a little bit about, yeah, going into university and then how you made your way with your husband to Chicago?
like you said, I had to find my own corner, right? Like in our house, there was no concept of anybody studying professionally. So the college I had set myself to get into has an acceptance rate of less than 2%. And we were a joint family, and I had younger siblings. So they would be all over the house. I didn't have a room to myself. So all of us shared one room, and it was their favorite pastime to disturb me while I was studying. Right?
As it always is with siblings, right? Yeah.
I had to find my physical corner, so which happened to be my grandma's puja room, which was not climate controlled. So it was literally out in the open. I had my table, and I knew because my grandma would be worshipping almost all day, nobody would come and disturb her. So that worked in my favor. None of my siblings would dare to enter that room. But then more challenging was the mental part of it, because the path in our family was that girls were supposed to learn all the chores of the household, right? They need to know how to cook, how to clean, how to multitask, and also to take care of kids, meaning siblings, right? So I was being an older sibling, I was supposed to take care of younger siblings. But then I was studying for this challenging exam, right? So literally every day used to be a battle for me to find that slice of time in between all the chores and after school to sit and study for that entrance exam. Through all those tears and fights and all of that, I did finally get into college, which thinking was quite remarkable because most of my classmates had gone through rigorous training just to get into the college. They had paid some professional institute to train them to qualify for that entrance test for at least 3 4 years, whereas I didn't have that. And then when I was in the undergrad program, I learned about this really excellent grad school in Bangalore, which is world class even today, Indian Institute of Science. I gave entrance exam for that. By this time, my parents knew enough about me to leave me alone, because getting into IIT is like getting into Harvard, right? If a child gets into Harvard, no parent in their right mind would stop their kid from that. And that too with scholarship. It was equivalent to that because literally our fees was peanuts. Our program was paid for by government and Indian taxpayers, basically. So I got into ISC Bangalore. That's where I met my husband. And while we were studying, we decided to stay back in India because Bangalore was a little sleepy town with a lot of good companies, R&D centers. So we're like, best of both worlds. Why do we need to leave our country? I stayed there for 10 years in Bangalore, but our marriage, even though it was good, it got into some really rocky issues. So even though I was able to rebel as a girl in my parents' house, I was not able to rebel as a wife and mother because I already had my daughter, and I was supposed to be the wife and the mother and also a working person, right? So it was too much, and my husband didn't realize like how much of a burden it was, and his parents were putting a lot of pressure on me for everything. It just seemed like I was never able to satisfy anybody, and that actually took a toll on my health, and I had to leave my job. And which is when my husband decided that since now I was not working, I was free to accompany him wherever he went. So he decided to come to US, and I left my job and came here to US. So that's how I landed up in US.
So you're in Chicago at that point,
Mm-hmm.
and you're really managing through some healthcare issues, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes. Yes. So the health issues in retrospect were, of course, they were manifesting physically, which means I was in a lot of pain, like back and neck issues, fibromyalgia, lot of allergic issues. But then there was a big mental component to it because sadly didn't I wasn't trained into the concept of financial independence. Like I thought just going out and earning is enough, right? But then our finances was mostly controlled by my husband. So that was a big thing. So my salary would go into this family kitty, and my husband would make all the decisions of where the money would be spent and saved and all of that. And over the period of years, I realized that I didn't have a voice in that. If there was something he felt justified, that went, but not what I wanted, right? And I didn't even know that I could raise my voice about that, because if I did, I was either labeled as stupid or extravagant or not financially savvy. So that was one part. And then also physically, I was supposed to take care of the family, even though I was working, because that is the woman's job, right? So I was like, what is this? What is my life become, right? And this person I had met, I loved this person, and I couldn't recognize this person. I didn't understand how somebody you loved so much became so uncaring. It was all very
Yeah.
confusing. And anybody I talked to, all of my friends or family, they will just say, hey, marriage is all about compromise. Oh, I have my husband's permission for this, so I shouldn't be complaining about that. But I knew everything was wrong. So
Yeah.
I started actually taking therapy at that point. At one point, I realized that this was domestic verbal abuse that was happening to me. It was extremely difficult for me to accept this because I thought this happened in uneducated class, right? So I started going through therapy, and I realized that with food and yoga, it was possible to reverse some of these health conditions. So I became vegan. I started doing yoga, and also I started painting. That was a big part. All of that frustration that I had in my mind, I started painting it. But at the time, it was very painful because even just like this action, it's same as working in front of the computer. So at my doctor's advice, I would just paint for a few minutes and then just take rest. Then again paint for a few minutes and take rest. A painting would take months to finish. But then I was expressing myself. Suddenly I had a purpose. My life had a purpose. Even though the loved ones thought that I was this black sheep in the family who didn't know how to keep relationships, who didn't know how to be a wife or a mother. Well, I was wrong in all aspects for the people who I knew, right? For them I was wrong. But when I painted, I was right.
Yeah. Let's explore that because I think that's amazing. So let's talk a little bit more about your art. You founded, is it Pratibim? Is
Yes.
how it's pronounced? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. Can you talk a little bit about Pratibimba and this art platform that you really brought to life?
Yeah, so Pratibimba literally means reflection. So reflection could be at two level. One is like reflection as in physical reflection in mirror, but what I really meant was reflection as in reflection of my inner self, of my soul. So what I found was when I was painting, the emotions and feelings that I had, I was expressing those. But then I realized that there were so many others who were connecting to it. So what I learned was that when you actually go deep and raw into yourself, it reflects on others' feelings as well. And you are able to connect with others. So that is what was basically the motivation of the platform. I established a gallery in Chicago. I run the gallery for some time. I was teaching art there. It was also a platform for other artists to come and showcase. But then in this time, I realized that I need to spread out and find my another corner in the world.
Exactly. You found another corner of the world called Silicon Valley, I think.
Yeah.
So you talked about in art that you were able to connect with other people
Hmm.
through a community. And it's now striking me that your professional life begins to mirror your life through art. So you remove the location constraint. You're open to moving to the Bay Area, to Silicon Valley. And wow. So, and then your life takes another little jog or zigzag. Can you talk about that and your experience through that?
Yeah, so we're in Chicago and my family relationship is still not okay. My father in law expires and my mother in law comes to live with us, and things take a really ugly turn. And I'm not working, remember? And so I was thinking that when I'm not working, they will be more appreciative of because I have more time for family. But turns out that that was not the case. And my mother in law literally commented on how I was mooching off of my husband's salary. And that was the last straw. And that is when I removed the location constraint. And I'm like, I don't care. I will go wherever I get a job. And because I was in networking software, I ended up in Bay Area in a month's time.
Yeah. Yeah.
and and get my daughter. So to begin with, I still had my art studio in Chicago. I didn't move my studio, but I started working in tech. A couple of years later, I realized that my life was just in front of the computer. Just seemed like I was talking to the computer 24 by 7. And I wanted that to change. And as you already mentioned, that with my experience in art, I realized that I was good in connecting with people. So I wanted a job that would marry both of my strengths, being an engineer and being able to communicate and being able to communicate technology.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. And amazing. So you move into community work
Mhm.
and into open source communities. I want to circle back to your art. I was diving into your quantum connection paintings collection. Right. I'm like,
Mhm.
oh wow, this is really cool. Can you talk about that with our listeners?
Yeah, definitely. When I was in technology, there is something called real time protocol. So, where you're literally syncing the clocks of different routers. And when I had to work on that, that was the first time I understood the concept of time being relative.
Mm.
So, Einstein's theory of relativity made sense the first time in my life. And that actually spurred me into thinking, oh, okay, so then maybe quantum mechanics is not so rubbish at all, right? So then I started looking in quantum mechanics. And what I understood is that we are all made of subatomic particles, right? Electrons,
Yeah.
protons, neutrons, which is nothing but waves of energy. They're not particles, they're waves of energy. And they become particles only when there is an observer. when there's somebody is measuring. Otherwise, they're waves. So, which means the universe is material only when there is a conscious observer. So, at the very basic level, I am nothing but energy, you are nothing but energy. This computer is made of nothing but energy, and everything is just made of energy, which comes into existence just because we are conscious. And so basically, what that means is this world is an illusion. And in our philosophy, in Hindu philosophy, I'd grown up hearing that this world is Maya or mirage.
Mm.
So it cannot be perceived through our five senses. So basically, I mean, we can't see, hear, or touch or feel the atoms and the waves, right? At that level, it cannot be perceived through our five senses. So it just taught me that science is confirming what we knew for ages. While I was in my waves of depression, I had also started meditation. So there were some times where I had felt energy or presence of somebody ra- larger than myself. At one instance, it was my great great grandmother in our native village. And in another instance, it was a yogi back in India. We were like meditating across oceans, and I felt his energy very close to me. I mean, it's unexplainable. But, and at one point, I had an out of body experience where I am out of my body and I'm observing myself during meditation. So I just like kind of understood that we are all connected at a very basic level, and that's what this quantum series talks about. So this painting, you can't see, this is one of the latest ones. It actually
Wonderful.
has sunflower and bees, and how the bees actually make honey. It's of course some arrangement of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. But if it were not for bees, most of our plants will not be pollinated and we won't have any veggies.
Right.
We,
Right.
no, we
Yeah.
won't have any food. Like
And how do we exist without that? Right. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, even animals eat plants to survive, right? So even if you eat meat or animals, you finally need plants, and bees are the ones that make the plants reproduce. If you look at it, connections are everywhere. So
Yes.
that's series is about.
And it really caught my eye. The openness, the transparency with which you communicate really came through for me.
Many times people try to be diplomatic or maybe hide the true feeling or abstract out or whatever. But I'm not like that. I don't sugarcoat things. I just say things how I feel those things. And I've been thinking about why I do that. And there is some research around it. You may be aware of that. The first generation women who rebel, right? They learn early on that that is the only way they're going to survive. And because they rebelled at the time where nobody else did, they know or they have that blueprint or they have that path and they're not afraid. I did at one point, didn't do it like as a wife and mother, and that's when my life was not okay. But now, because now I was able to come out of that, and when I do that, when I see things like I was earlier saying, right? When I go deep into my raw emotions, that is when I find somebody else connecting with me. I felt that too. I'm thankful that you said that. I'm thankful that you painted that. And that puts me going. But of course, there are others who don't like it. They're like, oh, why are you talking about things which are ugly, right?
There's a beauty in putting yourself out there and just and being who you are and being comfortable with that, right? It's just this freedom and flexibility and just pure beauty that I think comes from doing that. And like you said, that's when you felt the most connection with other people.
Mhm. And also, I talked very clearly about my relationship with my husband. And me and my husband, I'm still with my husband, right? And we talked about that a lot. And in the beginning, he was not comfortable in us sharing our story. And I'm like, if you are not comfortable in us sharing our story, that means you are still not okay with it. Like you have not accepted your mistake. I want to share it because I know, I'm not sure, I know that there are others going through the same thing.
Yeah,
And I want them to understand that there is hope. And what does that hope look like?
absolutely. There's such acceptance in that. And then passing that knowledge along to others. And I think that's a great segue into what advice would you give to others, whether it's your peers or that next generation?
So there's one podcast that I heard. This was a person from LGBTQ community and first generation coming out of it. And they wrote about their experiences. And what they told their interviewer was that, like, somebody told them, just because somebody has not said that means you need to say it.
Yeah.
So, what I'm saying is, if you're my listeners, wherever you are, you're in a professional life, your personal life, you are facing something, you are feeling something, please say, please find somebody to talk about that feeling, because I'm sure there is somebody else out there experiencing the same thing. And if your friends and family who you're close with, they don't understand it, then they're not your people. Find another set of people.
And find people who support who you uniquely are.
Yes, yes, yes. So
Yeah.
don't stop. Keep finding your people. People who understand your feelings are really your people, not people who keep putting you down.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we wrap up, Sujata, what does she likes the way mean to you?
I would say the pioneers in our own way. We women being in this man's world, we all find our own way to navigate through this. And I am really glad that you are founding this and we get to share each of our journeys, because no one's journey is like other ones. Everybody's journey is unique.
Yeah, and it just like you've found your own corner at each step of the way and continue to do that because you are definitely your light shines bright. And I know that I've been inspired by you, and I think that others will as well. So, Sajata, I can't thank you enough for being on the program. Thank you so much for being transparent, for sharing your, like you said, your unique story. I very much appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to my conversation with Sujata Tibrewala. I hope you found it as incredible as I did. Her path has been one of defying expectations and finding her own authentic corners in our world. You can connect with her and explore her powerful artwork on our website. That link is in the show notes. As always, I'd love to hear what resonated most with you. What were some of the most memorable takeaways? Let me know either through the social handles for the project or shoot me an email at nicole@shelightstheway.com. See you next time.